Welcome back to another edition of Talking Ball. It's Jack and JD. And today we're looking ahead to the Duke versus George Mason Blue Devils versus Patriots matchup here this coming Tuesday. First Blue Devils game in a week, so we had a little bit of a break here, but we're back in action. And Duke will be looking to stay on their winning ways as they play the Patriots, as I said, this coming Tuesday evening. And it should be a good matchup, a matchup of two teams that, get after it on the defensive end of the court.
One thing before we start, we're recording on Sunday afternoon at 4:18, and this may be the first time that I've ever read in The Athletic that they said with regard to the NFL football games today, the early round, around the 1:00 games versus the 4:30 games, they said, go do your chores. Unless it's your team that's playing, go do your chores. There was not a matchup worth watching. And then at 4:30, all hell breaks loose with some just great football games. But first time I've ever seen that. So I've actually been doing other things and looking forward to our time together here, and the games will still be on. But the week off, George Mason also had a week off. So I think we're back to one of my three keys here before you run through the whole thing is that first segment. That first 4 minutes, we've been off for a week. They've been off for a week. They're certainly everyone's hungry when they play against Duke, but that is certainly one of my three keys that I'm going to be watching for is that first segment, especially with a week off. But you, Jack,
And speaking to that, I think there's also been some time for us to kind of reflect on the Incarnate Word game. And I just, going back to that quickly here, the one thing is, looking back on it, they had gone the West Coast trip. They had the big Auburn game, then the big Louisville game. I think there was just an emotional letdown, kind of before that game, and that's maybe had to do with some of the first half issues that Duke had offensively. But I think, if I may, and I'm trying to spin this positively, to borrow, a phrase or something from another sport, in baseball, they like to say, like, how do you pitch when you don't have your best stuff? And so Duke certainly didn't have their best stuff against Incarnate Word, and they still won by 26 points. So I think this team has shown that even when they're not at their best, they can still win games. They certainly didn't have their best stuff against Louisville as well. And so what I'm excited for is over this week, has Coach Shire, he said, it was kind of funny in his post-game press conference, they asked him, what do you want to work on? And at first he gives the kind of typical, I want to work on the defense, I want to work on the offense, I want to work on everything. But then as he kept talking, he kind of revealed that the real area he wanted to focus on was the offense and try to figure out how he can get these guys in better positions to succeed. And so I'm curious. I know it's been finals week, so I don't know how much time exactly that they've had to really fine-tune things, but they will have had a week off before this game. So I'm excited to see if there are any different wrinkles that we can see from Coach Shire and this Duke team offensively.
So that brings me to the second key of the game. And I'm going right back to a toe issue. Malik Brown. We're going to know a lot that if he's not playing after a week off, then we've got ourselves a significant toe issue that may take a while. If he's back in the lineup and he's playing, then no harm, no foul. But that's the second thing that I'm going to look for is Malik Brown playing as he suited up. So the first segment and Malik Brown, those are two of my three that I'm looking for. But why don't you take us through the George Mason Patriot team and what we need to look for?
Yeah, let's do it. So George Mason, it's kind of interesting when you look at their team in a similar way to Duke. They have kind of they have a really tall starting lineup. They go 6'4", 6'5", 6'7", 6'8", 6'8". And then they'll bring off a 6'11" center off the bench, Giovanni Emajuri, who's from England. And then another 6'5" guard in Jared Phillips, along with Katie Johnson, who's 6 foot. And then Justin Begg gets some minutes as a 6 foot freshman. Along that line, most of the guys they play are either fifth year guys or seniors. They're just very experienced. They've been at a number of schools. Their leading scorer, they're led by 6'5" Darius Maddox, who played 3 years at Virginia Tech, played against Duke before transferring over to George Mason. He's averaging just about 15 points per game. Their point guard is 6'4" Braden O'Connor. He's their leading assist guy at 3 assists per game. He brings up the ball and he can attack the rim. He played at UMass Lowell, and he is a junior. He's one of the younger guys on the roster. Zach Anderson started his career at Florida Gulf Coast before transferring over. He's a solid three-point shooter. He's 6'7". Woody Newton spent some time all around. Spent some time at Syracuse, Oklahoma State for a couple of years, and now he's at George Mason here. And then lastly, in the starting lineup, Jalen Haynes spent his first year at Virginia Tech, then went to East Tennessee State, and now redshirted last year and is part of the starting lineup here for George Mason. He's a very interesting guy because he's 6'8", listed at around 250 pounds. He's a very skilled offensive big man. He's not the best defensive big man, though. But this is a team that overall is a good defensive team under Coach Tony. I'm going to butcher. I don't have his last name written down very well here.
Coach Skin.
Skin, thank you. Coach Tony Skin. Last year, they were 20-12, and this is his second season at the helm. They're 7-3 this year. They are on a hot streak here, coming in having won 5 in a row. So they're a good defensive team. They guard the three-point line well. Their only losses, for that matter, are to Marquette. I mean, no shame in that. They've been awesome this year. And the other 2 losses are each by 1 point to Central Michigan and East Carolina. And then just a last couple points on the rest of the guys who come in. So I mentioned Justin Begg, lone freshman who gets consistent minutes for them. Giovanni Emajuri is a 6'11" big man. Sometimes he'll share the court with Jalen Haynes. Most of the time, that's their center duo. And then Katie Johnson spent 3 years at Auburn before transferring over to George Mason here. He did miss the last game due to the concussion protocol, but as you said earlier, it was more than a week ago, so I expect him to be back. And lastly, Jared Billups, 6'5" wing. Started a few games to start the year. Comes off the bench now, and he is their best defender. And in terms of the team, what's interesting is that they will mix in some 1-3-1 zone looks. And for this Duke team, that will be interesting to see because we have struggled at times to hit three-pointers, and that will force us to shoot the ball a bit more, which is what George Mason's defense is designed to do.
So that does immediately bring to mind my third key to the game, which is, or the third thing I'm watching for, which is who's got the hot hand. Because if they go into the zone, somebody has got, is it going to be K2? Who's going to be the guy that's going to step up this time? So, but I do have a shout out to the fan base at George Mason at masonhoops.com. The great chatter going on there and picked up a lot of things. So you guys really are incredibly supportive. Not quite the size of Kentucky, but pretty good. But picked up a couple of really interesting things. So as you pointed out, Darius Maddox, has already played against Duke and actually played at Cameron. No, actually played against Duke, but not at Cameron. He played in the ACC in the AC, played in the tournament, but not at Cameron because it's Woody Newton who will likely guard Cooper Flagg that actually played at Cameron when he was with Syracuse. And the current assistant Mason, George Mason coach, Louis Hinnett, played against Duke when he was at Boston College. And Darren Harris's dad played for George Mason. So always looking for those connectivity between the two teams. But the best part, just the best part was, and I actually did some background on Coach Skin. He's an alum from George Mason. He played there from 2003 to 2006. And his senior year, George Mason, that was the year that George Mason went all the way to the Final Four. Skin, though, did not play in the first round game when they upset Michigan State. Why? He had been suspended for a game that he had played in the Athletic Association conference tournament when he may have punched someone below the waist and had to sit out a game. And so he didn't play there, but he was instrumental in the run that took him right up until they lost in the Final Four against the Gators, Florida. It was going to be, I forget if I think that's the first year of their back-to-back wins. And then that hasn't been done since UConn, right?
Well, UConn just did it.
Right. That's what I'm saying. They did it back. They did
until.
it for until better way to clarify it. But, and
those are good connections. I'm still blown away from the Louisville, the Rain Smith, Tyrese Proctor one. That one was pretty wild. And just to keep it going with the ACC connections, the coach of that George Mason team, Jim Larrañaga.
I knew you'd know that. I knew it because when I saw it, I said, oh, wow, it was Jim Larrañaga. I said, Jack is absolutely going to be all over this and know who the coach of that team was.
Yeah, as you know, my outside of Duke, my two favorite teams and coaches have been for quite some time Miami and Florida State with Coach Larrañaga and Coach Hamilton. They're not in the best of places right now, but those guys had awesome programs for a number of years at those respective colleges in the ACC and always gave Duke trouble, especially Miami. But circling back here to George Mason, I think, the one thing that they're going to be able to do is just make things tough for Duke offensively. And I'm curious how, Duke is going to handle that. I think having the week off is going to be good, though, for Duke. And to your point from earlier, will Malik Brown play? Because last time, I thought it made sense, to rest him. But to your point, if he's not playing today, I think this is a good, not only it's a much better team, I think George Mason compared to Incarnate Word, but I think also after this game, there's not so much time. The next game is going to be Saturday with Georgia Tech, and it's a noon start, so you don't have, it's not like a game starts at 7 o'clock, so you really don't have much time on Saturday. And as we have come to learn, Malik Brown is an essential piece for this Duke team this year. And I guess the only thing that I'm hoping for specifically from Duke, other than, some other odds and ends, is will Duke take what they learned from last game and say, we got to keep feeding Kama Malawach, because I think they may have figured something out. This game, albeit there is going to be more size on the interior to contest with him,
And
but
weight.
and
These
weight
their 6'11" guys come in at like 250.
and 6'8" is 250 as well. But that being said, Kaman is still going to be either 6 inches or 3 inches taller. And so I think, especially when it's Jalen Haynes, who's 6'8", 250 or 260, the lob threat should still be there. And so that's something I'm curious, can do continue to look for that because it clearly works.
Well, staying with the Mason Hoops fan base, clearly they're rooting for the Patriots to pull off the loss, but the aggregate comments are pretty much that they see this as a loss for the Patriots. And as one guy put it, optimistically, they lose by 8 to 10. Pessimistically, they lose by a blowout of 50. Realistically, they lose by 18 to 20. I would be very happy with that outcome at home, an 18 to 20 point win, especially if we're distributing the ball well. But Malik Brown's toe, first segment, and who's got the hot hand? And that's that's a tricky thing to coach because the first shot, the second shot, you know it who is going to keep that up, and therefore you want to get him the ball and get him the minutes. You got to quickly try to sort that out, and maybe it's more than one player. So I'm certainly hoping that we have some reliable things. Although one other possibility, and I like to stay with three, is Cooper Flag was really quiet for Cooper Flag. As opposed to the Louisville game when, you said not quiet. Excuse me, he still had a 20-10 game. But in the Incarnate Word game, he was kind of quiet. So does Cooper just be Cooper and, go off?
I think it'll be in between. I think from what we've learned from Cooper Flag, the bigger the game, the better the opponent, the better he seems to play. When he's played against Incarnate Word and Maine, I don't remember the Army game. His production just hasn't quite been there. But when he's played against Kentucky and Kansas, the first half wasn't great. Second half was really good. Auburn, Arizona, as you said, Louisville. Those have been his best games. And so I think the opponent here is kind of in the middle between an Incarnate Word and Auburn or Kansas or Kentucky. And so I think we'll maybe get like a 12-point performance from Cooper Flag. But to your point, who else can get going? And the guy who I'm hoping for is Caleb Foster, who the first two games after being benched, I thought really responded well. He had 9-point first halves. And then against Incarnate Word, wasn't quite the same. He did have a number of assists, though, which was good. I think the biggest thing I think that's frustrating as a fan of Duke and a fan of Caleb Foster is that you get flashes of it. You get a good half here, you get some good plays there. And so to me, the big thing with Caleb Foster is that it's nothing physical. He is the best guy on this Duke team at getting into the paint and penetrating a defense. He's the best guy at that. And so to me, it's can he figure it out? Can the coaching staff and his teammates help him figure out whatever is going on, above the neck with him mentally? And I think we've started to see the first half against Auburn, the first half with Louisville, some signs that he's starting to turn the corner. And so I'm hopeful that can continue in this game with George Mason because this Duke team is going to need a good Caleb Foster to go as far as they would like to go.
Well, I think one of the things I do expect Sion James to be the starter again.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that makes a lot of sense. He's just a rugged, big guy. And then if he can't bring it up, he just gives it to Cooper to say, all right, finish bringing it up and start the offense, in the way in which you're going to. And I think that Caleb Foster, who I was not high on, where's our point guard going to be? It's Caleb Foster. He's not really the guy. He has responded overall very well to this change. And when he gets on, I've been very, very pleased by the minutes he's been giving us, even though a little inconsistent in the incarnate word game, but much better than what had been happening. And I think that Sion will start, and you'll see Caleb come off the bench. And it's been really, he's had really good looks. He's been able to set and take his three, whether he hits it all the time or not, but he's been wide open. Somehow the offense is allowing for that when he's in, or the combination of the offense and the defense. But also then, if he can draw his man to him, because there's a gap there that's allowing him to go up from 3-point range, then, as you say, let's set it in motion and head to the basket. And in which case, can he also do something else? And I don't know yet whether he's got that ability, but it's sort of like, okay, you're at a 3-point range. Guy's coming at you. You decide to take it to the basket, draw players to you. Can you then lay it off to somebody else for an easy two? I don't know if that's in his repertoire of tricks in terms of, when he was a point guard. I know he can slash to the basket. I don't know whether he can slash to the basket and dish.
I think he can. It's just, can he do it with good decision making? Because from what I've seen, sometimes he'll do it and he makes the right decision, but it's too close to like 50-50. Whereas, the really good guards, I'm not going to compare him to Tyus Jones, but, he'll make the right decision 8 times out of 10 or 9 times out of 10, right? If we can get Foster to 7 times out of 10, this team's got a chance to go really far. And to your point on he's been getting open looks, I agree. I think for the most part, there's been some other guys who I might question the shot selection a little bit more. But I think for the most part, Foster's shot selection, especially from 3, has been pretty good. Inside the arc, we can definitely improve. But from 3, I think he's taken a lot of open ones. And while you were talking, I was just curious and went to look. He's shooting 31%. Last year, he didn't shoot quite as many, but he was at 40%. I think there's some room for him to improve just because I think he is a better shooter than that shows. Same with Con Knipple, who is shooting 34% from 3 right now. I think he can get closer to 40%. So I think those two guys especially, along with Mason Gillis, who right now is shooting 27% from 3. I think this Duke team has some room to kind of regress to the mean in a positive way from their 3-point shooting. They are currently led by, if you were to guess, who is the best 3-point shooter on this Duke team on a percentage basis right now?
Tyrese.
He is second. He definitely has the most attempts, though. He's at 41%.
Okay. After that, from 3-point range, Mal is 1 for 1. Maybe 1 for 2.
He's 1 for 3. He's 1 for 3.
1 for 3?
Yeah.
All right. Who is it? Who is it?
So, technically, it is a tie, but really, it's Isaiah Evans. But when I say technically, Spencer Hubbard is 1 for 2 on the season. Isaiah Evans right now is shooting a blistering 17 of 34. Now, Proctor has nearly doubled his attempts. He's 27 of 65. That's why I said what I did before. But that just goes to show, I mean, granted, 6 of 8 against Auburn, 4 of 6 against Incarnate Word. You can say what you will, but 6 of 8 against Auburn is just insane, and we needed all of them. And I think that just goes to show I'm looking for Isaiah Evans to get 18 to 22 minutes in this game, because I think the way he shot the ball, as long as his defense continues to improve, his minutes should steadily increase. I don't know. Right now, I would say the person who you would take a little bit of minutes from, so that can to facilitate that, would probably be Khan or Mason Gillis. But I'm not John Shire, so that's ultimately his call to make. But I think Evans has, he's been in that like 15 to 18-minute range. I think it's time to get him to 20. So I think that's another thing that I'm looking for in this game with George Mason.
Um, I think it's going to be fun. But one of the things that I noted yesterday, which really goes to the point we said, which is maybe the ACC doesn't have as many highly ranked teams as they used to. Clemson lost yesterday, I think.
Yeah, they lost to the Tigers. Tigers versus Tigers.
Yep. And so,
Memphis, to clarify.
but uh, there was a couple of games yesterday where it was within their conference between ranked and unranked teams. And the intensity of a rivalry is just so. Duke, I mean, do I think this is a Final Four team? I absolutely do. I absolutely do. And anything less than that, I think we're going to be doing this YouTube channel program for a long run. Anything less than that, I'd be surprised. Though there was one comment on the MasonHoops.com that actually said this is the worst team since 1991 that Duke has had, and that person got shouted down by other George Mason fans saying, "What are you kidding me?" Like this. So I think this team's going to go on a long run. Everybody's going to be gunning for them. There are going to be no easy games that they're going to have, and George Mason is a really good way to hopefully shock the system to say, okay, as you pointed out, Jack, it's not Incarnate Word, it's not Auburn, but George Mason's coming in there. They're not a ranked team, but they've won 5 in a row. How do you respond after being a week off? Because when you go into ACC play, just like George Mason, I fully expect is going to be coming. This is a huge win. Even if they lose by 5, it's a huge game.
Win by 5.
No. I was actually saying that even if they
for George
came
Mason,
close,
yes.
For George Mason, if they came close, it would be.
Yeah. Well, you're saying that, I don't think George Mason. Like, I think if George Mason was they could be in the ACC and be a low level ACC team. Like, that's kind of how I view them. And so, to your point, I think this is a good test for this Duke team. Where are they at right now? Because to your point, as we get into, we're going to be firmly into conference play after this game, with the exception of the Illinois game in February in Madison Square Garden. And by the way, Illinois took Tennessee down to the wire at home and lost to a buzzer-beating layup by Mr. Gainey, who had a great game. So that's good. Could be a ranked opponent by the time Duke plays them. They look good. But with Clemson losing, there's a chance that Duke is the only ranked team in the ACC for a couple of weeks here. And to that point, every ACC team, it's going to be not only it's Duke, but this is my chance to get into the tournament. And so it's going to be a really tough year for Duke in the sense that pretty much every game, there's not much they can gain, but there's a lot that they can lose. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on them each game, because if they lose any games in the ACC, it's going to be really detrimental to them versus an Auburn or a Kentucky. If they lose in the SEC, it's not going to be so much of a demerit once you get to the seeding and tournament time.
So the early projection was when they were comparing conferences during some of the games yesterday. They said that the ACC is projected at this point to have no more than three, and if they get lucky, four teams in March Madness. But when they went to the SEC,
The whole
they said
conference.
12 teams. It will set the record for the most number of teams. And there's one team that may be on the bubble, and there'll be a play-in team.
I gotta say, I'm guessing the four teams that they were saying for the ACC, and the three teams certainly are Clemson, North Carolina, Duke, and then the fourth team, my guess would be Pittsburgh. I would not put it past my two sleepers for the ACC are Georgia Tech, who we'll see this coming weekend. Oh, that's cool. And Notre Dame. And both teams have been dealing with injuries, which is, I think, part of the reason they've gotten off to slower starts. Georgia Tech has had a number of injuries to starters, and they won't be back, I believe, for the Duke game. But come the new year, those teams could get on a run and maybe get themselves on the bubble and be teams, maybe five. Maybe they could get to five. But to your point, it's going to be a rough year for ACC teams getting into the tournament.
Well, and to the degree that Coach Shire scheduled those four tough games,
Really important.
that, that was really important because if you're an SEC team, it's almost like the old days of the Big East when every game in the Big East was just brutal. It was like, every night it was going to be a war. And in the SEC, these are all, at this point, what is it, Jack? Five out of the top 10
Yes.
teams in the SEC are currently, ranked there. I mean, every night in the SEC this year, you're going to be going against a high quality team as opposed to in the ACC, every night Duke will probably be getting the best of what is currently not a ranked team or considered a high quality teams.
Before we get out of here, let me ask. I'm gonna put you on the spot. I
Uh,
believe. I believe we have 21 games remaining. We're 8-2. How many losses do you think that we could have? Obviously, it depends on who the losses are to, but just generically, how many losses do you think we can have and still get a number one seed? Because just before you answer, I think an SEC team could get a one seed this year with like 5 losses. I don't think Duke's going to have that luxury.
no.
So, what do you think the number is?
So what'd you say? 21 games remaining?
We're 8-2 right now. What do you think our final record? What would be our worst case that we could still get a one seed?
Three losses, total of five.
So we would be 26-5.
That would be if we lose a sixth game, if I understand your question, we're not a one seed.
I don't think we can lose 5 games.
I know it's the lack of parity in the conferences is so strong, and I was stretching it, saying maybe because of the Auburn win that we might have a chance with 5 losses, but the SEC teams with five, boy,
I, yeah, there's certainly going to be two. I think there's certainly going to be two one seeds as of right now from the SEC, and then I think Iowa State is going to be a one seed. I think they're the best team in the Big 12. And so it's just a matter of who's the fourth spot. Is it someone from the Big 10? Is it Duke? As of right now, I would think it's Duke. But one other team I forgot, Marquette. They're certainly going to be in that conversation as well.
they may be, although I think they lost yesterday.
Did they? Well, if they did, then I may have to take them out of the conversation.
Just double check that.
You're
Or they
right.
had
You're right. They lost to Dayton. You're right. I got to take them out of the conversation. It's a good correction.
Okay, but think about this. As college football has decided that the format for the top four seeds is based on quote unquote power conferences, so that the four top seeds automatically go to the four power conferences. And in men's basketball, no, not at all. You've got two and very possibly three SEC teams could be one seeds.
Yeah, the only reason I think it's going to be limited to two is because they're going to beat up on each other. You know, someone is going to, I feel like whether it's Kentucky or maybe Tennessee, or I don't think it's going to be Auburn. I think they've kind of proved themselves pretty early. But somebody...
Did you see what they did to Ohio State yesterday?
They should have mercy rule.
It was close to 50 points.
Janai Broom, he had like 23 and 21 and 6 assists. It was like absolutely insane. He must have felt like he was playing against a high school team or something. He could do whatever he wanted to. He was just very happy it wasn't Malik Brown out there.
So the SEC has a conference tournament.
Everyone does. Yep.
Everyone does.
Well, except for Ivy League. I think
Ivy League does. They do. I think they finally moved to it, but I do think there's one left that still may not have it, but because there's so many conferences.
So many.
Okay.
Conferences.
So imagine that we're filling out brackets and we're looking at it and we're looking at 3 1 seeds. The final four will just be the SEC tournament, conference tournament all over again.
The one thing, though, I have learned from the past few years is just because the ACC is not good in the regular season doesn't mean you discount them once you get to the NCAA tournament.
Well, all right. If you're going to NC State,
it's not just NC State. Last year, Clemson made it to the Elite Eight.
True.
In previous years, Syracuse, who not the past couple years, but a couple years prior to that, they would be very mediocre, barely, maybe shouldn't have made it into the tournament a few years, and they would still get to the Sweet 16. It's just for whatever. Miami 2 years ago, they had a good team. Final Four. Like, it's just kind of consistent that somebody from the ACC is going to go on a run. And listen, I'm a bit of a homer with the ACC. We got to be a little bit biased here. So I think with that being said, we've rambled long enough here. Looking forward to this matchup with George Mason. We'll be back for the post-game show after the game. So be sure to check us out for that. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Like this video. Leave a comment. We want to hear from you. And share it with a friend. We'll see you guys after the George Mason game. Peace.